As the story begins, we see a man injecting a green liquid into an egg yolk. Almost instantly, the yolk splits into two. The scene shifts, and we're introduced to a group of people creating a star named Elizabeth Sparkle. Elizabeth is a stunning model and the host of a popular show. At the height of her fame, fans would flock to take selfies with her star. But over time, her star lost its shine, and people's interest in her began to fade. Eventually, the star fell apart, symbolizing how Elizabeth's fame was waning, and no one even bothered to fix it. The scene cuts again, this time to Elizabeth herself, now in her 50s. Although she's older, she still hosts the same show. After a long day of shooting, she heads to the restroom, only to find the women's bathroom closed. She reluctantly enters the men's restroom, where she overhears the show's director on a phone call. He's discussing how Elizabeth is no longer the star she used to be. Ratings, which were once sky-high because of her, have plummeted. The director plans to replace her with a younger, more attractive woman to revitalize the show. Hearing this shatters Elizabeth. The beauty she had once been so proud of was now gone, and so was her place on the show. In the mirror, she notices the deep wrinkles etched on her face, a painful reminder of her lost youth. She was not just mourning her aging appearance, but also the fact that she was being discarded from the show she had given her life to. Determined to save her career, Elizabeth confronts the director. But he tells her bluntly, "Elizabeth, I can't help you. My show depends on what the audience wants, and they want beauty, something you no longer bring to the table." His cold words devastate her further. She leaves the hotel, but while driving, the director's hurtful words keep echoing in her mind. Distracted, she loses control of her car and is involved in a terrible crash with an oncoming vehicle. Miraculously, she survives without a single scratch, a stroke of incredible luck. After a brief stay at the hospital, she is discharged. But her emotions overwhelm her when she sees her pictures being taken down from billboards, replaced by younger faces. While at the hospital, a nurse examines her spine and hands her clothes. As Elizabeth gets dressed, she finds a note tucked into her coat. It reads, "I've changed your knife," along with a mysterious drive labeled "The Substance." When Elizabeth gets home, she immediately plugs in the drive. It contains information about a magical fluid called the Substance. This substance had the power to transform an old person into a younger version of themselves. Alongside this miraculous fluid, there was another liquid designed to sustain both the old and new bodies. The process wasn't overly complicated, but it required one key action. Every 7 days, both versions of the person, the old and the new, had to be activated to maintain the transformation. This discovery offered Elizabeth a way back to her former glory, a chance to reclaim the beauty and fame she had lost. To maintain the new, younger body, Elizabeth had to inject a special substance into it every day, which would be extracted from the spine of her old body. Whenever one body was active, the other would remain unconscious. At first, Elizabeth dismissed all of this as nonsense. Frustrated, she tossed the flash drive into the trash, convinced it was a hoax. But that night, her emotions overwhelmed her once again. She found herself staring at old pictures of her youthful self, yearning for the beauty she had lost. Desperate, she gave in and messaged the contact number to place an order for the mysterious substance. The response she received was brief. The person on the other end simply asked for her address and provided her with a special location and a card with instructions. The next morning, while reading the newspaper, Elizabeth saw an ad for a casting call. The company was searching for a new model to replace her. This realization deepened her despair. Along with the newspaper, she noticed a black envelope, inside of which was a number. Following the instructions, Elizabeth arrived at the secret location, a hidden room within a building. Using the number card, she unlocked a small locker and retrieved a box, which she took home. Upon opening it, she found various items: a serum, a one-time use injection, and a stabilizer kit. According to the instructions, she would have to use this kit daily to maintain the stability of the new body. She recalled from the flash drive that the stabilizing fluid would come from the spine of her old body. The box also contained a specialized kit for managing the transformation between both bodies, as well as special food to sustain both the young and old versions of herself. Elizabeth stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection, torn between fear and hope. She hesitated for a long time, unsure if she should go through with it. After much contemplation, she finally injected the green fluid, the mysterious substance, into herself. At first, nothing happened. But after a few moments, Elizabeth was hit with an excruciating pain. Her eyes felt like they were going to explode, and she could feel her body contorting unnaturally. Her eyeballs seemed to double in size, and then her back started to split open. Out of her old body, a new, young version of herself emerged. This younger version of Elizabeth stood in front of the mirror, awestruck. She could hardly believe what had just happened. She was now more beautiful and youthful than she could have ever imagined. Mesmerized by her own reflection, she marveled at the success of the transformation. But there was still the matter of her old body. After tearing herself free from the older version, she attached a food bag to it to keep it alive, just as the instructions had indicated. That night, she reveled in her newfound beauty, enjoying every moment of being young again. However, when she woke up the next morning, something was wrong. Blood was dripping from her nose. Panic set in as she realized that something might be terribly wrong with her transformation. She suddenly remembered that she had been given an activator kit as well. It was essential for keeping her new, younger body functional. To do so, she had to extract the substance from the spine of her old body and inject it into herself daily. Without wasting time, she began the process, removing the substance from her old body's backbone and injecting it into her younger self. Once done, she instantly felt normal again, and her youthful beauty returned, even more radiant than before. Feeling confident, she got ready and went for the audition at the same show where she had once been dismissed. When Elizabeth, now going by the name So, walked in, everyone was captivated by her striking beauty. The director, taken aback by her transformation, immediately selected her for the role. So had successfully reclaimed her position. Knowing she had to change bodies every week, So came up with an excuse. She told the director that her mother was ill, and she needed to visit her village every week to take care of her. The director, without hesitation, agreed and allowed her to take the necessary time off. With that, So secured the job and started enjoying her new life. Her youthful looks and charm quickly won over a large audience, and soon her face was everywhere, on billboards, in ads, and all over the city. As 6 days passed in her new body, the 7th day arrived, marking the time for her to shift back to her old form. The old version of Elizabeth would now be active for the next week. After making the shift, So attached the food bag to her new body to keep it alive, then returned to work at the show. However, that day at the office, the director handed her a gift as payment but treated her disrespectfully, humiliating her. Hurt by the experience, she went home feeling awful. The following day, while reading the newspaper, Elizabeth received an envelope from the company where she had obtained the substance. Inside, there was a message notifying her that her new refill kit had arrived. Without delay, she put on her coat and went to pick up the kit. Now, 7 days had passed, and it was time for Elizabeth to transform back into So. She activated her younger body once again and felt exhilarated, ready to enjoy all the pleasures of her youthful form. However, she realized that constantly switching between her two bodies posed a risk. Someone could discover the truth if her old body was seen. So, she made a bold decision. She would break down a wall in her house and hide Elizabeth's old body inside it, ensuring no one could find it. So's activities, however, started causing noise and disturbances. Her neighbors, fed up with the commotion, came to complain. But So's stunning beauty was so mesmerizing that instead of complaining, one of the neighbors found themselves charmed. So smiled and said, "If you ever need anything, feel free to call me. I'm just next door." But So was engaged in a secret mission. She had no intention of involving anyone else, so when her neighbor knocked, she shut the door in their face, making sure to be discreet. Then, she spent several hours completing her hidden task, constructing a secret room within her house, where she carefully concealed Elizabeth's old body. Now that So had fully taken over Elizabeth's identity and was on her way to fame, she made sure to hide all photos of Elizabeth from her youthful days. Immersed in the thrill of her new body and newfound success, So forgot one critical detail. Today was the scheduled day to shift back to her old body. Elizabeth's old form was nearly out of food, and it was essential for So to switch. So even invited a friend over to her place, engrossed in socializing and other activities. However, she suddenly felt blood trickling from her nose, and her body began to feel strange. Realizing it was time to switch bodies, she hesitated. Overcome by greed, So decided to stay in her younger body a little longer. She extracted all the remaining substance from Elizabeth's old body and injected it into herself, stabilizing her condition for now. What would happen to Elizabeth's old body would soon become evident. So pushed forward, spending another 7 days in her new form before finally deciding to switch back. When she returned to Elizabeth's body, she was horrified to discover that one of her fingers had melted. This was a direct consequence of her neglect. She had failed to switch bodies on time. Panicked, Elizabeth contacted the company that provided the substance and explained her situation. "I missed my cycle," she admitted. "I didn't switch bodies in time, and now one of my fingers is disintegrating. What can I do to fix this?" The company's response was chilling. "There is no solution. What's done is done," they told her, leaving Elizabeth in fear. They reminded her that although she had two bodies, they were essentially one. Her new body was born from the old one, and any damage to the original would eventually affect the new. With these unsettling words in mind, Elizabeth went to pick up her new refill kit. Afterward, she headed to a restaurant to calm herself, where she noticed an old man behaving oddly. He seemed to be watching her and muttering strange things, which caught Elizabeth's attention. She noticed a mark on her hand, the same mark she had seen on the nurse's hand at the hospital. But this wasn't just any mark. This old man sitting in front of her was the older version of that nurse. The old man asked her a chilling question: "Has your new body started eating you yet?" Hearing this, Elizabeth panicked and fled the restaurant. Back at her house, Elizabeth tried to find happiness in her old form. Wanting to feel beautiful again, she invited a friend over for a visit. She dressed up in her finest clothes, did her makeup as if she were still in her younger form, and put on her most elegant outfit. But just as she was about to leave the house, she saw posters of So, her younger self, plastered all over the streets. The sight crushed her confidence. In a fit of despair, she ruined her makeup, messed up her hair, and spiraled into a mental breakdown. Consumed by depression, she overindulged in food before collapsing into bed. The next morning, we see Elizabeth after she had already switched bodies, preparing for her show. She was now in her younger form, dancing and shooting for the show when suddenly, she noticed a strange lump on her lower body. Horrified, she rushed to the washroom and tried to figure out what it was. When she pulled at the lump near her belly button, she discovered it was a chicken, something she had eaten during her binge the previous night. The sight terrified her, and then suddenly, she woke up. It was all a nightmare. In reality, Elizabeth had already switched bodies that morning and was getting ready for the actual show. But when she arrived at the set, she was shocked to find the crew packing up, ending the shoot early. Fearful, she rushed to the director for answers. To her surprise, he turned her anxiety into excitement, telling her that instead of the regular show, she would now be hosting the prestigious New Year's Eve event. Overwhelmed with joy, she immediately accepted the offer without thinking twice, even though New Year's Eve was the very day she was supposed to switch back to her old body. Ignoring the consequences, So remained in her younger body for days on end, continuously extracting the stabilizer serum from Elizabeth's old body and injecting it into herself. This constant drain began to take a severe toll on Elizabeth's original form. After many days, when So finally switched back, she was horrified to see how frail and aged Elizabeth had become. The repeated serum extractions had left Elizabeth's body almost completely deteriorated. Filled with self-loathing, Elizabeth began to resent So, her younger version. In a furious rage, she tore down all the photos of So from her house and even covered up the mirrors, no longer able to face the reality of her transformation. Everywhere she looked, there were billboards of So, reminding her of the beauty and life she once had. Desperate and panicked, Elizabeth called the company for help. Elizabeth, desperate and anxious, asked the company if there was any way to reverse the damage. "Is there a way to get my old body back?" she pleaded. "I've already brought out this new version, So." The company coldly reminded her, "We already warned you. What's done is done. There's no going back. But if you want, you can stop the process here. Live the rest of your life in your old body." Elizabeth, however, refused to accept this fate. She wasn't ready to give up on her youth. So, when she got a call from So's body, she switched back again. After switching, she extracted the serum from her old body and injected it into So's younger form, continuing the cycle. For 3 whole months, Elizabeth indulged in the pleasures and beauty of So's body. Then, just one night before New Year's Eve, her serum supply ran dry. That evening, she went to visit a boy, but soon started feeling something terribly wrong. Her body parts felt as though they were bursting. Panicking, she tried to extract the serum from her old body, but nothing came out. Terrified, she contacted the company again and frantically asked, What should I do now? The company calmly explained, if no serum is coming out, it means you've exhausted your supply. You'll have to wait for a new batch. In the meantime, you need to switch back to your old body. Elizabeth's heart sank. So's condition was deteriorating rapidly after the call. She reluctantly began the painful process of switching back to her old form. Meanwhile, the boy, hearing strange noises, came to investigate. He approached the washroom, but before he could see Elizabeth in her grotesque aged state, she managed to lock the door. Now trapped in her old bald and feeble form, she struggled even to walk. Overcome with fear and desperation, Elizabeth called the company one last time. I want to end this. I can't take it anymore. The company agreed, offering her a termination serum that would end the transformation cycle for good. Her body, now decrepit and unsightly, was barely holding itself together. Despite her weakness, she hid her appearance beneath her clothes and went to collect the termination serum. But as she prepared to inject the serum into So's body, she hesitated. The company's manager had warned her, once you inject the termination substance, whichever body you're in at that moment will become your permanent form. That thought made her pause. She gazed at her reflection in the mirror, her anger towards So boiling over once again. It's all So's fault, she muttered. In a fit of rage, she injected only half of the termination serum into So's body. Then she stopped, suddenly recalling something important. So was about to host the biggest show of her life, and soon she would receive an award, basking in the praise and admiration she had long craved. Driven by greed, she hesitated to inject the full termination serum into her body. Instead, she used only half of it, clinging to the hope of maintaining her beauty and fame. She then tried to wake up the dormant body of So. After several failed attempts, Elizabeth grew frustrated and decided to activate the body manually. She removed the activator from her old body's backbone and applied it to So. With a sudden jolt, So woke up, but upon realizing Elizabeth's intention to terminate her, fury consumed her. In a fit of rage, So lashed out, beating Elizabeth mercilessly. The final blow crushed Elizabeth's skull, leaving her lifeless on the floor. As So stood over Elizabeth's lifeless body, the gravity of what she had done hit her hard. She had killed Elizabeth, and now, with no access to the activator serum, her own future was uncertain. She quickly cleaned up the scene, hiding all traces of the crime, and rushed off to host the New Year's Eve program. The crowd cheered wildly as she appeared on stage, but just as So began to feel the thrill of the spotlight, a sudden discomfort swept through her. Blood began trickling from her nose, and panic set in. She hurried to the washroom, only to find that 2 of her teeth had broken and fallen out. Her body was beginning to deteriorate, and she realized that with Elizabeth's death, her body had become unstable, hollow. Desperate to survive, So rushed home to retrieve the activation serum. But during the elevator ride, one of her nails and even her ear fell off. Terrified, she tried to hide her decaying body from the other people in the elevator, pretending nothing was wrong. She hurried into her apartment and quickly injected the activation serum, but nothing happened. In her panic, she remembered 2 other substances she had kept hidden, which were meant to be used only once. Without hesitation, she injected one of them into her body. The pain was excruciating, far worse than anything she'd experienced before. Her body began to tear apart at the waist, and out emerged a horrifying hybrid, part So, part Elizabeth, a grotesque monster. This new, nightmarish version of So was a terrifying fusion of the 2 bodies. Her mind was in complete disarray, unable to grasp what she had become. In her delusion, she covered her monstrous face with a picture of So's former self and made her way to the show. As soon as she stepped on stage and took the microphone, the photo slipped from her face, revealing her monstrous hybrid form to the audience. Gasps of horror filled the air as everyone recoiled in fear, screaming at the sight of her. They called her a monster and ran in terror. In the chaos, a man in the audience grabbed a baseball bat and struck her across the face. The blow was so forceful that it knocked her head off, sending blood splattering across the studio. As So's body collapsed into grotesque, writhing pieces, it scattered like an insect across the floor. Amidst the wreckage, the remnants of Elizabeth's face lay on the ground, eerily staring up at the ceiling with a twisted smile. Blood pooled around it as the show came to a horrifying end. By morning, the workers arrived to clean up the mess, oblivious to the gruesome events that had unfolded just hours earlier.